Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's webinar with Designated Medical. Mark Peacock from Pricemaker. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes until everyone has come in. Normally, we get a few late arrivals, so just give us a minute or two and then we'll get started. Just for those that are here, we will be recording today's webinar, as you may have just heard. So that will be made available to you over the course of the next couple of days. We do have recordings of all the webinars in the series. This is number 9 that we've done. So you will be able, we'll send you a PDF with a link to all the recordings. So covering everything from getting started in private practice and planning all the way through to CQC, marketing, day-to-day running, medical indemnity insurance. We've covered quite a lot this year. So yeah, we'll send that recording out to you over the next day or two. So, okay, just waiting for a few more people to attend and then we'll get started. Can everyone see the slides okay? Everyone can hear me okay? Okay, I'll just maybe perhaps you just drop that in the chat. That would be great. Okay, thank you. Great, well, let's get started. Thanks for joining today. Today is all about pricing, all about the art and science of pricing in private practice. So it's a subject matter that doesn't get discussed very often, but actually is incredibly important. And I was lucky enough to attend a webinar recently with Mark, and I was really blown away by the presentation and thought it would be great to apply that to the world of private practice and what we operate in. So for those, Mark, would you mind just moving on to the slides, if that's okay? So for those of you that have not been to these webinars before, we've been running them all year. They are an essential guide, essentially, to guide you through those steps of setting up, launching, and growing your private practice. So we delve into different areas, everything from kind of CQC through to pricing, through to medical indemnity insurance, all the things that you need to think about when you're setting up and launching your private practice. So they're designed to help you avoid those common pitfalls and mistakes that we see, helping you save time and money in that process. And ultimately what we're trying to do is get you to the point where you're launching quicker and seeing those patient revenues kind of come through. So that's about the webinars. Next slide, please, Mark. So these are the webinars we've run so far this year. They will be continuing into the new year, and I'll come on to those a little bit later. Preparing for success, we've moved into marketing. We've talked a lot about day-to-day running and the finances. We've then touched on CQC, video, medical indemnity insurance, and last month we touched on search engine optimization. So a broad range of topics. So as I mentioned at the top of the webinar, the recordings for all of these webinars are available upon request. So we will send you a link with recordings to all of those, including tonight's. For those of you that are unfamiliar with Designated Medical and have never heard of us before and just attending for the first time tonight, we are a full service consultancy. We've been going for about 13 years, and we offer everything that a practitioner may need when setting up, launching, and growing their private practice. So specific private practice consultancy, we offer advice on CQC registration, marketing, branding, website development, pricing, obviously falling under that category. Also medical billing, resourcing, medical virtual PAs, practice managers. So that's just a little bit about us. But this evening is all about pricing, and I'm delighted to introduce you to Mark Peacock, who is the founder at Pricemaker. Mark, I'll let you introduce yourself in just a second. I am the Chief Marketing Officer at Designated Medical. I'm a health and wellbeing startup specialist. I spent 25 years in marketing and operations, and for the past 5 years, I've been helping doctors set up their private practices and helping them grow and succeed. So we are your speakers for this evening, and I'm going to hand you over now to Mark, who is the founder at Pricemaker. So over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Simon, and good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. So I'm Mark Peacock. I run a pricing advisory business. So I help companies review and improve their pricing. I had a 25-year career in corporate life, and I started this business just over 7 years ago because I thought there was a real need for pricing advice, particularly for smaller businesses. So what I do now is I help businesses with coaching, consulting, workshops, and so on. to really try and show people the art of the possible when it comes to pricing, because I think it's often seen as something that's a bit scary and a bit of a dark art. Whereas actually there's quite a few simple things that you can do to your pricing for your business that make a big difference. And I'm going to share a few of those ideas with you this evening. So let's get going. So we're going to cover off some tips for smarter pricing, basically. So what does that mean? So we're going to look at some of the common mistakes people make with pricing, particularly new businesses, startups, and what the implications of those mistakes are. I want to talk to you about the benefit of better pricing and why it's one of the most important profit levers that you can pull in your business. Then we're going to touch on how customers, how your patients perceive pricing and what that means in terms of the value that they think they're going to get from your services. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of some slightly different pricing methods that you can think about using for your business. And I've got an example from one of my clients who was a medical AI business, and a kind of a mocked up example, if you like, for what you could think about doing for a private practice for the initial consultation pricing. And then at the end, we finish on the question of should you or should you not put your prices on your website. So please do pop your questions in the chat as we go along. We'll review all the questions and we'll take them at the end. So please make notes and ask questions as you go along, and then we'll come back to them and make sure that we cover off as many as we can as we go through. Just one thing to say. So the goal of this webinar is I'm trying to teach you some key principles of pricing. We can't give you any specific pricing advice because we don't know enough about your business and your situation. So the aim here is to teach you some key principles that are fairly straightforward and will hopefully help you grow your business. Okay, so let's get going. So the tips for smarter pricing. Here's my 5 main tips, really. And I think in many industries, many markets, the way people approach pricing is to just copy the competition. It's to look around in the market and to say, well, what's everybody else charging? Try and find an average and then pick your price somewhere in the middle. But the problem with that is you're not differentiating yourself. You're not identifying the value and the reason why people should work with you if they so choose. And you're allowing yourself to be commoditized effectively. So that's a typical mistake that I see people making. Secondly, we're going to look at understanding the profit impacts of pricing and what that means for your bottom line. Thirdly, one of the key things I want you to think about is if somebody asks you for a price, rather than just saying, well, it's £200 or whatever the number is, I want you to try and change how you respond to those questions and always offer a set of price options. And I'll explain what I mean by that later. I'm going to talk about the importance of using high price anchors in your pricing offer and why a price anchor is your best friend in terms of communicating the value that you offer. And then finally, we'll look at how, the question of showing your prices on your website. So, in terms of mistakes, typical mistakes I see many businesses, particularly smaller businesses, make. The first one, and this is particularly relevant for new startups, is to underprice your services. Why do people do that? Well, typically it's because they lack confidence and they're new into the market. So they think, well, I'm new, I can't charge more than my competitors. So I'm going to pitch myself at the low end of the price scale, and then eventually I'll try and move my prices up. But the trouble with that is if you start at the low end of the price scale, it's very hard to move up. So you're far better off trying to work out the best possible price that you can charge from day one, and then work out how you can justify that price using your credentials, the quality of your service, your marketing and your branding, and so on. Secondly, so we just talked about this. So in terms of copying the competition, if you copy your competitors, how do you know whether they are doing it correctly or not? You don't know. And secondly, they have no interest in you getting it right. So whilst it's important to understand what's going on in your competitive landscape, if you just simply copy them, you're giving away quite a few advantages that you can create for yourself by devising a smarter pricing model. And hopefully by the end of this short session this evening, you'll have a couple of ideas as to what you can do with that and see how that can make a difference to your business. There is a common belief, number 3, the common belief that the market sets the rates, right? And it's this immovable force and the market determines it. And if any of you have ever studied economics, you'll have heard about supply and demand and setting optimum rates, optimum prices for a given demand and a certain amount of supply. And that's true typically in commodity markets, but in terms of professional services, I think you can work around that by being creative with your pricing offers and not allowing yourself to just follow the mantra that market sets the rates, because there are ways that you can influence the market with your pricing, as we'll see. Number 4 is to offer discounts too easily. Again, new businesses, startups are quite guilty of this because we're desperate to get customers, right? Particularly in the early days. So we think, well, I need some business. I'm going to reduce my prices or offer a discount. And the problem with that is you're not really thinking through what that means for your bottom line. It seems a simple thing to say, well, I'll reduce my price by 10%. But if you're doing that, you're always reducing your profits by a greater number. So just bear that in mind. Whatever number you discount your revenue by, the impact on profit is always greater. We tend not to think that through. And then finally, number 5, set and forget. So at some point, you've got to decide on the pricing list, the pricing matrix that you use for your business. And then typically, once that's done, people will tend to set and forget. In other words, fail to regularly review and improve your pricing. Now, as a minimum, you should be reviewing your pricing annually in line with your cost increases. You can do it more often than that if circumstances warrant it. I was speaking to another client earlier today, not in your industry, in manufacturing. They hadn't put their prices up for 15 years, right? So it's shocking, to be honest with you. And the problem is, in that time, inflation has really eaten away at their profits. And they've just become scared. They've become scared to do anything with their pricing because they don't want to upset their customers, which is entirely understandable. But you do need to have a process in place for, at the very least, an annual review of your pricing. Okay, so here's one of the few charts that I'm going to use, which has a bit of maths in it. So there are plenty of studies that show the conclusive link between improvement in price and an improvement in your net profits. And I like this one because of the way it shows the charts. So in this study, they did a study on a whole group of businesses in America, and they asked the question, if we improve any of our metrics by 5%, which is the number shown in the left on your screen, what happens to profit, which is the number shown in the bar chart on the right-hand side. So as you can see on this slide, in this study, where revenues are increased by 5%, profit goes up by 12%. Where cost of goods sold comes down by 5%, profit goes up by 10%. Where overheads are reduced by 5%, profit goes up by 5%. And that makes sense, right? All other things being equal, if you reduce your costs, your profit will go up. There's nothing unusual there. But the thing I think that we miss as business leaders, as business owners, is the one at the top. Price, when done correctly and done sustainably, has the biggest impact on your bottom line bar any other metric in your business. Now, the exact numbers will vary depending on the financial structure of your business, your market, the products you sell, your customer base, and so on. But the core essence of this is true for every single business. McKinsey famously quotes that for every 1% increase in price, it will yield an 8 to 10% increase in net profits. And it's staggering, right? It's staggering that business owners, business leaders don't really understand this, don't really appreciate it. And then even when they do understand it, they fail to act on it accordingly. So I'm giving you this information now in the hope that eventually it will make a difference to the way you run your businesses. So price is an incredibly powerful lever for profit growth, firstly, and it's very quick. You can change all of your prices tomorrow as long as it's done correctly, and you get the benefit of the improvement in profit from tomorrow. Whereas if you're trying to grow a business and you put a marketing campaign in place, it might take weeks or months to generate more customers. So pricing is the quickest lever you can pull to grow bottom line. Okay, I'm going to give you a few illustrations now about from the world of the psychology of pricing. So hopefully this will resonate with you. Because again, I think people think that pricing can only ever be a scientific exercise. But it's, as the title of this webinar says, it's very much an art and a science. And we need to use a bit of both when designing our pricing model. So there's a great example in a book called Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely, and he is a professor of behavioral studies at MIT in the United States. And he tells this story about this lovely experiment where he gave his students some aspirins. He gave half of his student body some aspirins and said they cost $2. And for the other half, he gave them the aspirin and said they cost 10 cents. And neither group heard what the other group was told. He said, go away and use them. And when you come back, tell me how effective they were. And the students who had the $2 aspirin, 85% said, yeah, it cured their headache. For the students who had the 10 cents aspirin, 60% said it cured the headache. Now, what neither group knew was that in both instances, the aspirin wasn't an aspirin, it was a placebo, right? So it was a lump of inert material. So the only difference in the experiment was the price they were told. There's no difference in the product quality, there's no difference in the cost, there's no difference in the price. The only difference was the price they were told. So the students who had the $2 aspirin thought, well, it must be a good product. So their perception of value before they use it is high, and their actual experience of value is high. 85% said it cured their headache. Whereas the students who had the 10 cents aspirin probably thought, well, it can't be much good, can't be a very high quality product. So their perception of value is low and their experience of value is low. Only 60% reported that it helped. So the point of the story is you need to do everything that you can to avoid being in the 10 cents category and do whatever you can to have at least some offers in the $2 category or whatever's equivalent for your business. And basically, I mean, you already know this, right? You already know that pricing sends a signal of quality. We know that luxury brands have a high price. We know that if you go to Lidl or Aldi supermarket, it has cheaper prices, and the price signals the quality of the product that you're getting. So I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but I'm just trying to illustrate how you can think about that understanding and applying it within your business. So that's the first piece of the jigsaw puzzle. The second interesting idea, again from a bit of the psychology of pricing, is to think about how would you sell a really expensive item. So if we were doing this in a workshop, I'd ask for volunteers to think of how would you sell a really nice $2,000 watch. So we see this TAG Heuer watch on the left. It's beautifully designed, it's Swiss made, it's highly engineered, it's precision timing, it looks great, and so on. And those are the kind of answers that people typically give. You know, we sell the benefits, we sell the features, we sell the design, we sell the quality. So we're trying hard to justify the price of £2,000 by focusing on those aspects. Now, there's an old saying in the watch industry that the way to sell a $2,000 watch is to put it next to a $10,000 watch. Okay, so imagine if somebody's now coming into a watch shop and they're in the market for a high quality timepiece, and they've got two options to look at. And one is the $10,000 Rolex with all of the associations that come with that brand, and it's a beautiful looking watch. And then on the other side, you've got a $2,000 TAG Heuer watch, which still looks great, and you know, I'm sure it's a great watch. But what's different now, of course, is that as a buyer, I'm comparing the TAG Heuer to the Rolex, the $2,000 price to the $10,000 price. So the $10,000 price is giving me a price anchor against which I'm now judging the price and the value of the other product that I'm considering. So we've deliberately introduced a reference price into the buying consideration process to better help the buyer assess the value that they place on the product that you're trying to sell and make a more informed decision. Okay, so this is how you can use pricing in this way to influence customers' perceptions of quality. Now, obviously, in this example, it's two completely different products, two completely different brands, but you could do it within a portfolio of services. So you can have a high-end product that's worth X and a cheaper product that costs Y. And you can do the same thing to try and influence, subtly influence. You don't want to mislead. There's nothing that I talk about that is designed to mislead people with pricing tactics. It's all about helping them make a more informed decision in a way that might favor you some of the time. There's another great piece of theory that comes from Daniel Kahneman, and he won a Nobel Prize for this in his book Thinking Fast and Slow, which you might have heard of. It's called loss aversion, or what he calls prospect theory. And the simple idea is that as humans, as people, we experience a loss twice as much as the equivalent gain. So a way to illustrate that is if I were to give every single one of you £100 right now through the screen, you thought, great, thanks, Mark, that's lovely. And then tomorrow morning you wake up and you realize you've lost that money, it's just completely disappeared. You'd feel the pain of that loss greater than the pleasure you got from gaining it in the first place. And I remember lots of, you know, sporting examples, you know, Jimmy Connors, the tennis player, saying, I hate losing more than I enjoy winning. Kevin Keegan, the football manager, used to say, I hate losing 1-0 more than I enjoy winning 1-0. It's the same thing, because as people, we are loss averse, right? So we do everything that we can to avoid loss. What has this got to do with pricing, you might be asking? Well, typically in business in general, and particularly in the world of sales and marketing, the natural tendency is to always communicate the lowest price first, right? Whatever your range of prices is, we start with the lowest price because we believe that's the best way to attract new customers into our business. and then we communicate the higher prices after that. The problem with that, of course, is you're going up in price through your range of services. So in other words, as a customer, as a prospect, it's costing me more money. So I feel that as a pain, right? As a psychological pain. And we don't want that to happen. Whereas, so what's actually the better thing to do, which sounds slightly intuitive, is to flip it on its head. And rather than selling prices from low to high, we sell them from high to low. In other words, we communicate our highest price first, and then we come down from there. So if you've got 3 products, one at £500, one at £200, and one at £50, you could say something like, well, our premium service is £500, our standard service is £200, and we've got an entry service at £50, rather than starting with, well, our prices start from £50. Yeah, does that make sense? So as a buyer, as a prospect, if you sell the prices to me and they're coming down, I'm saving money. So that's a gain. And we don't want people to experience that as a loss because they think they're having to spend more money. So we're going to bring these ideas together into a couple of pricing models that I'm going to show you in a second. But just before I do that, here's a really nice illustration of exactly this, the power of selling your prices from high to low. It's based on a study done a few years ago now in America, where they tested the price of beer in a bar, or a number of bars, I believe. And normally, as consumers, we see on a menu, we see the lowest price at the top and the highest price at the bottom, don't we? So the menu on the left is the typical one. So the cheapest beer is $4 and the most expensive one is $10. So what they did was they just flipped that menu around so that the most expensive beer is now at the top, $10, and the cheapest is at the bottom, $4. So can you imagine if you were looking at that menu, your eye will be drawn to the beers number 3, 4, and 5, right? So $8 and $7. Whereas on the left-hand menu, your eye will be drawn to beers 3, 4, and 5, which are £4, £5, and $6 in price. So what they found was that all other factors being equal, on a like-for-like basis, just by changing the presentation of the pricing, you can increase your average selling price. And in this instance, it went up by 4.1% over an 8-week period. And you've probably seen examples of this yourself when you go to restaurants. Most restaurants will show you a menu with prices low to high, but the smarter ones will show you the most expensive options first, because they understand this technique of influencing customers' perception of value by showing and communicating your highest price first. Okay, together a couple of ideas into a pricing example, a pricing model that you can think about using. And you'll be familiar with this kind of pricing approach because it's very common when you buy digital and online services, right? So it's called tiered pricing. We've got 3 tiers, and you typically see, like the example shown on screen there, a basic tier, in this case for £39 a month, a middle tier for £79, and an upper tier, in this case for £279 a month. And the example there is for a video marketing service. And what I love about this approach, I call it the ultimate pricing strategy, because it builds in many of the things that we've been speaking about this evening. So first and foremost, it offers customers a range of options. It lets the buyer have control over the buying decision. If you just communicate one number as a price, you're not giving your buyer any choice. You're saying, do you want this price, yes or no? Whereas if you change that approach to, here are 3 options you can consider, and Mr. Buyer or Mrs. Buyer, you choose the one that meets your needs at the price you're willing to pay, it's far more powerful. Secondly, as you can see here, it uses the high price anchor idea, so the Rolex watch example, and the upper tier, the Pro tier in this example, you'll notice the price for this is way more expensive. The difference in price is way more than between basic and standard. So there's a £200 price gap between standard and Pro, compared to a £40 price gap between basic and standard. And this is deliberate. So it's got to be worth the money for first and foremost, but we want to show a deliberately high price option for that upper tier, that premium tier. And what you'll find is when you communicate your prices using this idea, it actually becomes easier to sell, not harder, because I think people will sometimes struggle to communicate a price, £250 or whatever the number is. But if you do it within a set of options and get comfortable with that approach, it actually makes it easier to sell. And as a result, because you're offering three options, it will increase your conversion rate from inquiry to sale, and B, it will increase your average selling price because the high price anchor acts as a gravitational force, meaning that most people pick which option? They pick the middle option. Why? Because it's the least risky option. Yeah, they can't afford the most expensive tier, and maybe the cheapest tier doesn't quite do what they need. So for most people, most of the time, they'll pick the middle option. And that's fine. We must not mind which one people pick. We mustn't try and force them into one or the other. Now, I worked with a client earlier this year, a medical AI company based in Berlin, in Germany. And they've been going for about 5 years. They've created this brilliant AI product that basically scans a CT and MRI scan, reads it, assesses it using AI, and within a fraction of a second writes a report so that the radiologist doesn't have to write the report. Now, there are so many benefits attached to this product for a hospital. What we found was that they were selling it far too cheap. So before I worked with them, they were basically trying to sell a license to a hospital for about £5,000 a year, for example. When we looked at the value that each hospital would get in terms of faster throughputs, higher accuracy, this product can translate into multi-languages, it can produce a patient-friendly report, it can produce a doctor-facing report, it improved their insurance claims rates, and so on. That the value to the hospital of this service was in the millions. So we completely changed the model, and after I worked with them, they went out and they started selling their services like this. So this is an example of the tiered pricing strategy for this medical AI company. Now, clearly the numbers shown on the screen here are completely different to the kinds of prices that you'd be charging. But just imagine if there were no, if you divided it by 1,000, so option 1 is 120, option 2 is 175, and option 3 is 290. You could kind of think about those kind of numbers for an initial consultation fee, for example. And then the question becomes then, well, how do you differentiate those 3 tiers? So you've got to be adding more value. And what I love about this example is how this company, they've highlighted the additional things you get in bold if you choose option 2 or option 3. So in option 2, as well as the basic functionality, I also get an AI hub, I get remote training, and I get some project consulting, for example. In option 3, I get everything in options 1 and 2, but I also get on-site training, reference images, and customization, and so on. So it's up to the buyer then to decide, well, which of those 3 options best meets my needs at a price I'm willing to pay. And rather than trying to sell this product at £5,000 a year, they won a contract with Philips, a reseller contract for $175,000 a year. Right, so it fundamentally changed their approach to business. So I've taken the liberty of mocking up a very simple example of how you could apply this idea to the price of an initial consultation. And it looks like this, right? So we've got three options, and you need to give them a name. You can call them A, B, or C, but better if you can come up with something like entry, standard, premium, or something like that. And what you'll see here, and by the way, these are just illustrative. I'm not saying to you, these are the prices you should charge. Hopefully you understand that. And the point of this slide is to show you the art of the possible. And also, I don't know enough about your businesses to know whether how I've structured this is strictly correct, but bear with me for a second. So the idea here is that, if a new patient, a new customer comes to your practice, what are you going to communicate to them in terms of the price for an initial consultation? So if I was in your shoes, what I would be doing is something like this. I would have three options, A, B, C, whatever you want to call them. And for example, you have your entry option, £150 or whatever the number is. And that's a telephone consultation for 25 minutes, and the patient can discuss one concern within that. And typically they'll get a diagnosis or a prescription. So that's the cheapest option. The more expensive options are in person, and they're differentiated by the amount of time that you allow, and also the number of issues that the patients can discuss. And because it's in person, that can also include a physical examination if necessary. And the last tier you'll see is higher in price, higher in value, because it allows for a longer consultation time. It includes all of the other features, and it includes a follow-up call within that price. So there won't be an extra charge for a follow-up call in a week's time or whatever. It's all within that package price. So you're creating packages or bundles of services and putting a price on the package, rather than just selling your time on a per hour basis. And this is far more preferable for customers, because now they can make a decision. If I was a prospective new patient, new customer coming to your practice, I can say, okay, fine, well, I can make a decision. And for most people, they won't pick the premium tier. They won't pick the £350 option. But the job of that premium tier is not necessarily to be sold. Its job is to influence choice, customer choice, over the other two options. So for most customers then, the question will be, well, do I want the £150 phone consultation, or would I rather have the £250 in-person consultation? And it's their choice. They can make that decision accordingly. So it literally took me, I don't know, 10 minutes to sketch that out, based using the kind of principles that I previously described. You would need to, if you wanted to adopt this kind of model, you would need to make sure that the content of each plan is correct. I'm only guessing here, and that the prices are set at levels that are appropriate for your business. But hopefully that's given you some ideas as to what you can do with pricing, and shown you a bit about the art of pricing, rather than just thinking it's a science, because how you present and communicate your pricing is as important as what's the number. So coming near to the end now, and then we'll stop for questions. So the question I often get asked from smaller businesses is, should I show my prices on my website? And I think for your industry, businesses that you're going to be running, my answer is yes, you should. And the reason I say that is because I think in general, private practices don't share their pricing. But you'll know, both as a shopper, as a consumer, that there's an increasing trend these days for businesses to present their prices on their website. And the reason I think that's a good thing for your industry is because it shows trust, builds trust, and demonstrates value. And it shows a prospective customer that you've got nothing to hide. Now, people often say, well, what if my competitors copy me, or I don't know, what if somebody tries to undercut me? Well, let them. is what I say. I think you've got to focus on building the best business for you and differentiating yourself from the competition. And I'm pretty sure you will win more new business by publishing your prices than not. Because if you don't publish your prices and I come and look at your website, I mean, you can show me all of your credentials, but I'm still not sure how much it's going to cost me. And that's going to be a key question for me as a potential new buyer. So it allows me then as a customer to make an informed decision before I contact you. And as a result, you'll filter out the time wasters, right? You'll filter out those people who can't really afford you or for some other reason don't think you're the right fit for them. So you'll have better quality inquiries coming into your business as well. So that's my recommendation on showing prices on your website. There we go. So I'll quickly then summarize. So hopefully now this is what we said we cover at the start. So you've got a bit more of an understanding and insight into what I was trying to convey when I covered these points at the start. So don't just copy the competition. Work out the best pricing model for your business. Secondly, understand that pricing is the biggest lever you can pull to impact your profits. And after all, that's why we're in business, right? To make profit. So don't go crazy with discounts and things like that. Thirdly, when you're communicating a price offer, whether you do it verbally or whether you do it on a website or whether you do it in an email, always offer a set of price options so that the buyer can make an informed decision. Within that set of options, make sure there's a high price option, a price anchor against which they can then judge the value of your core services. And then finally, as we've just said, my recommendation is that in your industry, you can differentiate yourself by showing your prices on your website. So there we go. I think that's everything I wanted to cover. Just to mention, I do have a book on pricing. You can find it on Amazon and similar websites. I won't say anything more about it, but it is there. If you want to have a look, it's designed to be very easy to read. Lots of simple practical advice covering some of the ideas that we've covered today.
So, Mark, that was brilliant. That was really fascinating. I hope everybody on the webinar tonight has taken a couple of kind of tips and ideas for how they're going to apply some of these principles to their practice. So, but some really good tips there. Please do drop in into the chat your questions. We have had a couple in advance through the WhatsApp group and through email. So, Mark, perhaps I can pose these to you, and I've got a couple more as well. Maybe we've got probably 10 minutes or so. A question we got asked last night on the WhatsApp group was, should I charge more than my colleague for an initial consultation with a patient? So I don't know you're not going to give exact advice, but perhaps some of the principles you've spoken about today could be applied here.
Yeah, so I saw this question earlier, but I wasn't clear as to why this questioner could or should charge more than a colleague. Is it because they're more experienced or they have more expertise? That wasn't clear to me. If I compare that to, there's a number of things you could do here, I think. I think potentially you could charge more if your customers see the value in it, right? Ultimately, pricing is about the customer's perception of value. So if a patient, if a new customer thinks that it's worth paying more to speak with you, Dr. Simon Marett, about this particular condition, then maybe you can charge a premium. If you're all the same, level experience within the practice, then I wouldn't do it. So I think it depends on what you're comparing the other colleague, yourself to the other colleague. Why is it different? What's the difference? If there's a good reason that's justifiable, then you potentially can charge a different price, different rate. But if you're trying to offer the same set of services across a practice, then I probably wouldn't. So I hope I've understood the context of that question there, Simon. I don't know if you could throw any more.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's, when we speak about pricing, and again, you're the expert, we did speak about this briefly earlier, which is there is no exact science when it comes to pricing. Everyone's circumstances are different. The market's different. your patients are going to be different depending on where you're located, your expertise, the types of procedures or treatment options that you'll be offering. So, there is no playbook, I think, as such to sort of say this is what you should be charging. And I think that probably applies also, to the second question there, what should I charge? Well, it's a number of different factors that you need to think about before you think about pricing. It does need, there's a number of considerations.
Yeah, I think on the second question, I mean, for something as simple as a repeat prescription, that's not going to take too much work, and potentially you could include that as a free value add to help justify a higher price that you're charging your customers overall. That's one approach. Because if you're going to start charging, I mean, I've got no idea what a fee would be for a repeat prescription, 20 quid, 50 quid, I don't know. It feels a bit churlish, I would say, to be charging those kind of numbers. So I think my temptation there will be to include it within the price of the overall service. But for a complex consultation, certainly, if it's more complex and it's going to take longer and you've got to do more background work, then absolutely. But the key there is you've got to let the customer, the patient know in advance and let them make a decision. There can't be any nasty surprises at the end of the process. You can't just land them with a bill and say, well, that's how long it took me, that's the price. That's completely unfair. So treat your patients and your customers as you would like to be treated if you were in a similar circumstances, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Also, I think we need to bear in mind that everybody on the call tonight, on the webinar tonight, we're working in private healthcare, which is a premium market. You are all providing a premium service, and I think one of the things that we often get, the idea of charging perhaps 250, 350 pounds and then charging an extra 20 pounds for a prescription, as you said, it devalues the service. So one of the things we always talk about is about don't discount, in private healthcare. It's about adding value. How can you add value? How can you build these things into a higher value product or service that people will see more value in?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
The other questions?
Three, I think, Mark.
Yeah. So I kind of touched on that in the mocked up example I gave a minute ago. So I think you could charge more for in-person because it allows you to do a physical examination, obviously, as opposed to a video or phone call. But equally, you might decide not to. So in my line of work in consulting and training, does it make any difference as to the quality of the advice that I give or the training course that I deliver, whether I do it in person or online? It makes no difference at all. So you could argue that you should be charging the same price. It depends how you are packaging and presenting that service. If you do it in the way that I suggested a minute ago as part of a tiered offering, that helps to justify why you might charge a different price. But if the quality of your advice is the same, whether it's on a video, phone, or face-to-face, then equally, you can charge the same price. So I know I'm not giving a definitive answer there, Simon, but I guess that's the point, isn't it? You need to think about this, and it's not there's no kind of formula that I can give you that just says, well, for these kind of services, charge this, and for these, charge that. You just got to think it through and work out the best approach for your business.
And the final question, Mark, is one that I think touches on your point about your manufacturing client earlier in the session, where they hadn't put their prices up for 15 years. And this is a common theme. I've worked with many practices who haven't put their prices up for 4 or 5 years. And when I start working with them and pricing, I like you, I've always recommended that you review pricing once a year. Review the competition, review the market. Things are always changing. But what, in your opinion, is the best way to approach a price increase if you're thinking about increasing your consultation charges or your blood test pricing? How would you approach that?
So I think the first thing to do is to do it on the same date every year. So the 1st of January would be a good example. Or 1st of April, new tax year, for example, and get into the regular habit of reviewing and increasing your prices on that date every year. And you start to educate your customers, you start to educate your market that this is going to happen. Secondly, give as much notice as possible. So when I work with B2B organizations, I say to them, well, you've got to give a minimum of 30 days notice. right? So that means if you want to increase your prices on the 1st of January, you've got to have told the client about the price change by the 30th of November at the very latest. And what I've noticed, particularly with online service providers, is that they give even longer notice, whether it's my phone company or online services that I use. Giving 2 to 3 months notice of a price change shows confidence, and it gives your customers agency to make a decision that's best for them. It might feel scary when you first hear that and think, oh, I'll get loads of complaints. But actually, that's a good thing. You want to hear the complaints, if there are any. In my experience, there's very rarely that many that you fear. Out of 100 customers, you might get a couple of complaints. And the point of having a regular process, an annual process, where same date every year, 1st of January, our prices will be reviewed and increased in line with inflation, is you educate your customers and they start to expect it. Also, you lift up the value of your client base every year, and you might shake out a few at the bottom end who can't afford it, but you shouldn't be scared of that. It's good to have churn in your business, right? Because that means we're moving up the value of our client base every year. So a small amount of churn, customer loss, is a good thing, because you get rid of the people at the bottom end of the price range who can't really afford what you do and maybe therefore aren't a great fit. And what, as I'm sure many people will know, is that the clients who pay the cheapest prices are often the most problematic clients as well. So they take up even more of your time than you've allowed for. So yeah, stick to a regular time and date every year. Give plenty of notice, at least a month. And you could write out to your customer base, you could put a notice up in the surgery or whatever, or find some other way of communicating it, and allow them to understand the impact and ask questions if they so need. Treat them with courtesy. That's what pricing is all about. It's just treating people with respect and not being afraid to make those kind of decisions.
Yeah, that's great advice, Mark. I think in my experience in private healthcare, I think doing exactly that is exactly the way forward. I think where it's worked really well, where I've seen it work well, is with follow-up appointments where you've got a regular patient base that are coming back, that you give them notice and you give them the opportunity to book their next review consultation at this year's prices. So
great idea.
It softens the blow of that price increase, but you're still bringing your prices up every year, but it's given them the opportunity, it's given them the choice: do I book now or do I book it in a month's time at the higher price?
Exactly. Super tactic. Yeah, great stuff.
Should we move on, Mark, if that's okay? I think that's all the questions, I think.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for answering those.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everybody. That's the end of today's session. It was a really good in-depth session today. I hope you've learned a lot. Next steps, should you want to talk to Mark or myself about pricing, or any one of the designated medical team, then do get in touch at info@designatedmedical.com. We have got a private practice WhatsApp group to share ideas and questions with other practitioners, other members of other practitioners, other members of the group, so you can share those experiences. So you can click on the link. We'll send you around the slides, I think, as part of the email that will follow up this webinar. And then we have got a new series of webinars taking place in the new year, which I'll just introduce to you now, if you don't mind. Our next one is with Doctify, the patient review platform, on the 23rd of January next year. So the idea of unlocking the power of patient reviews and how you can utilize those to build your reputation, drive conversion, and how you can sort of measure the success of, whether it's Google reviews or Doctify or other platforms. It's a really powerful tool. Certainly in one of my previous roles, we didn't need to do any marketing. We relied purely upon patient reviews, and that was what drove our business forward through the word of mouth. So a really good session in January. And then we take a bit of a turn and a bit of a change for February and March, with the end of the self-assessment in January, and then the beginning of the new tax year. We're going to be starting to talk a little bit more around kind of finance, accountancy and tax. So webinar 10, we haven't got a date yet, but that will be confirmed in the next week, is learning how to pay less tax in private practice. So I think that's going to be a hot topic. So we'll talk you through that, and that'll be led by Vicky Garbett, our CFO, Designated Medical. And then as we approach April the 6th, we'll be talking you through how to prepare for the new tax year, how to get everything kind of lined up and in order, and how to benefit from some really good advice when it comes to the new financial year, the new tax year. So that'll be February and March. So 2 really good sessions to line up. Again, we'll confirm those dates over the coming weeks. And that is all from us this evening. Thank you very much for attending. A big thank you to Mark for his presentation. I hope you found it useful. And if you do want to get in touch, there are our details there, info@designatedmedical.com. And we look forward to seeing you in the new year, in January. Wishing you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we'll see you in January.